It's an amazing thing to think of, but Attorney General Biddle, around 1940, came up with a list of subversive groups. This was a concept that was not laughed at. I think when Claire says we've forgotten how to identify subversives, it's not so much we've forgotten, I think it's been ground out of us. And if we look at what happened going forward 10 years, when you see in Congress the great investigations of communist infiltration of the US government, in the House and the Senate, this was still a concept that American lawmakers, American professionals, and so on still understood. But when you see what happened to the investigators, not least of which Senator Joseph McCarthy, but many other investigators as well, who were congressmen and others, this became a term of derision. I mean, the idea that someone is subversive becomes something, you must see a communist under the bed kind of derision, and people were isolated and destroyed in their public lives. This is another reason why I think it's important to understand the infiltration in the communist in the middle of the last century by communists into the government and other institutions, to understand it as a real thing that happened, that was almost exposed but then layered over and almost forgotten. We see the same thing happening today, but we don't have the tools to identify it. This goes back to what the communist lessons were, which essentially is what we describe as political correctness. Political correctness is just another way of describing Marxist-Leninist lexicons that control speech and control thought. And we are all subject to them today. We don't even know it. It's everywhere, and this goes back to that same experience. Well, I would like to highlight the fact that we have heard from some speakers, notably some of our European friends, Lars Hedegaard, Geert Wilders, discuss Islam, not radical Islamism, not Islamist movements and things like that. And I think that I would like to offer some food for thought here, which is that one of the bases, or perhaps the basis of control that Islam uses against people is Islamic slander law, which prohibits criticism of Islam, and of course the death penalty for leaving Islam, apostasy. That's a pretty big control. And I think, and I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I've talked about it with many of you over the years. I do believe that when we and some of our most fiery, passionate leaders, political leaders, persist in discussing Islamism and radical Islam, and most of the fighting right, you might say, subscribes to this as well. I believe that we are operating under Islamic slander law that prohibits the criticism of Islam.